Egypt has a long history, and a lot of dishes originated from Egypt. Even though pharaohs have not left true recipe books, but we know a bit about what they ate because of what they documented. And also, in ancient Egypt, when pharaohs buried, they would put some food with them for the afterlife. This is a work of art that we've created. It's basically was inspired by the Rosetta Stone. It was discovered in the early 1800s. They, by accident, found the stone in the city of Rosetta in Egypt, the French invasion. And before that, they had no idea about what all these symbols meant. The stone is written in several languages, and through that, they were able to understand what hieroglyphics meant. So in the center here, we've got hieroglyphics, the language of ancient Egypt, Arabic, the language of contemporary Egypt, and finally English, which is a language, or one of the languages of contemporary Canada. And the idea here is we're creating connections between cultures and history. We have our recipe book here, which is, a secret on its own. We've got, all the recipes has been scaled. It's very standardized. Whenever we make something, we're consistently making it exactly the same way all the time. So obviously, I'm concerned about, when I have the recipe book here, if I put everything here, then I will have somebody just making a nice copy of this and off they go and they can just do everything we do. But just like the Rosetta Stone that I was talking about when it unlocked a lot of history, we have all these recipes. Within each of the recipes, we've got all these ingredients that go in that only I know what's in them. Do you know what's in these recipes?
No.
Yeah? Okay, yeah. So anyway, that kind of is a bit of a special angle, and that kind of makes our food a little bit more special and more unique. So I have my own Rosetta Stone. When you think about the amount of herbs and the protein, plant-based protein, that's all what the nutritionalists now are talking about, and these guys discovered it about 1,000 years ago. My cousin, who lives close to me, and I would often take a Tameia sandwich to him, so he had it, and that evening he sent me a message. Did any of the studies that they've done to measure the happiness of people, did anybody ever mention the impact of a hot Tameia on people's happiness? I love to break one open and look inside. And if you smell what I'm smelling now, you'll want to stop and have lunch. It's a smell of childhood. Egypt has a very long history. And the history goes back, I'm sure, times of the pharaohs, and we know certain things about their diet. And actually, their diet was pretty interesting. As time has evolved, the dishes came around. So, for example, Tameia is probably 1,000-year-old, created by Coptic Christians in the month of Lent when they're not allowed to eat meat. So they would create this amazing vegan food to replace it. But the other thing we also know is that Egypt has also been a crossroad. But also the Romans lived in Egypt, the Greeks, the Ottomans, and so on. So there was a lot of mixing of cultures, a lot of influences. A lot of Greeks and Italians and people from the Levant lived in Egypt even just pretty recently. And that also had an influence on food. Mastic ice cream with pistachios. I think that also came with these people. For example, the British Museum published this really nice book. It's called Food Fit for the Pharaohs. So we know, for example, that they ate bread. We know that they ate beans, different kind of beans, chickpeas, and so on. We also know that they ate a lot of fresh vegetables, including coriander, which is very important in ancient Egyptian cooking. They even seasoned their beer with coriander. Also, they had fish, a lot of waterfowl. So it was a very diverse diet that actually impressed travelers who went to Egypt. And one of the things that they were impressed about is the amount of vegetables that they ate, for example. My name is Amar. I own Papyrus. It's been on my mind for many, many years. The ultimate reward of this business is making someone happy for a minute every day. That's really the ultimate reward. So this is our dessert display. Konafa was a very traditional Egyptian dessert. It's actually eaten in different forms and different names all around the eastern part of the Mediterranean. And so we create a few different types of Konafa. I just want to show you our newest one. This one here is actually not a traditional Konafa at all, okay? And we call it a Konafa Canadiana. And basically the idea was to create something that uses Canadian ingredients and offers something unique and interesting. So this one, for example, has blueberries, hazelnuts, has a hint of maple syrup, and the shape of that of a canoe. And if you look at these little sticks, these are actual paddles, little canoe paddles. This is a bird nest Konafa. Again, this is pretty much our own shape and our style. It's stuffed with pistachios. It's really simple, but it's very, very high quality. We use beautiful pistachios, and it is not a shape that would be used in the Middle East. With our desserts, we get a little bit funky, okay? Except for one of our desserts here, which is very traditional, okay? We haven't really gone off, which is our basbousa. Basbousa is, kind of the word in Egyptian is almost just a kiss. And it's a pretty sweet, moist semolina cake. Egyptians love it. It's probably our sweetest dessert, but we use it, this is very, very authentic. We're using very traditional techniques and ingredients for this one. We wanted this restaurant to be not just about food. It's about culture and about connecting people together and about bringing people together. And I wanted to kind of have this museum feel. So one of the other elements here that are really interesting is this element here, which is the ancient Egyptian god Ra. Akhenaten, which was a pretty revolutionary pharaoh, he actually came up with the first idea of a united god, one god. And that was the first concept known at that time. And that god was the god of sun. And if you look at that element, this is how ancient Egyptians depicted it. And if you look at it closely, you'll see at the end of each one of these rays, there's a little hand offering its bounty to people, giving its life. The staple for Egypt is bread and four, beans. We make beautiful beans. We have these fava beans. Egyptian fava beans are amazing. We have our own way of cooking them. And eating that with bread, nothing beats that. The first to focus on only a few very popular Egyptian dishes. And we had to explain to people what do these dishes mean. And so, for example, Tameia, we had to explain to people, wait a minute, we could have used Egyptian falafel, but we did not want to create that association because people have a certain idea of falafel. And it's pretty much, to a large extent, it's in many different places. So we wanted people to explore, to come and say, what is Tameia? Okay, and we would explain to them. So in a sense, we were building the business one customer at a time. When we're talking about what are we having today, unlike, let's say, a North American culture where you're having like the main, and the main is mainly a meat and then other things on the side, we start to talk about the vegetable we're having for the day. That comes first, before the meat, which is very interesting. It reflects part of our heritage, which is really about plant-based diet. Very, very important to Egyptian food. If I'm at dinner time, I want to have a kushari. Kushari, for example, which is thought to have been created by French people living in Egypt about 200 years ago, couche de riz. Now it has pasta, it has caramelized onions, has a lot of different elements that I can't imagine would have been added at that time. If I'm at the restaurant and I want to have something for lunch, it's generally a Tameia sandwich. Today I'm going to make an Egyptian popular dish. It's called Tameia. It's actually a pretty old dish. It's about 1,000 years old. And it is said that it's been invented as a replacement for meat during the month of Lent by Egyptian Christians. It's mostly a lot of fresh herbs, and we have here split fava beans, which we've soaked, washed, and they're ready to go. Now, we want them to be dry because we don't want the tameia to be too wet. So everything is being well dried before we start. Okay, so what we're gonna start with is just very coarsely chopping these herbs. You know what? We grew up with tameia. It's a dish that you can buy in the street or you can make at home. With tameia, we often will use leeks instead of onions, but onions are usually fine as well. So I have here some coriander. Fresh coriander is very important for Egyptian cooking. So we've put in some coriander, we've also put in, and some leeks. I'm also gonna chop some garlic. And now we're gonna make this lovely mix with the beans, our fresh herbs, leeks, garlic, and then we're gonna add some seasonings to that. Two very important spices for Egyptians are cumin and coriander. Now this is a dried coriander seed, very different from the actual plant, the green coriander, and the flavor will be quite different. Salt, pepper, okay? And if you look at what goes into it, see how beautiful all that looks? And now we're gonna put this in a food processor. This smell that comes out of this is a reminder of shops in Cairo that make tameia fresh on the sidewalk. It's a reminder of Friday mornings when fresh tameia is being made at home. When you think about the amount of herbs and the protein, plant-based protein, that's all what the nutritionists now are talking about. And these guys discovered it about 1,000 years ago. This is ready now. We're gonna shape it into our little patties and we're gonna fry it. We're gonna start off by just putting a little bit of a layer of tameia here. As we're getting ready to fry it, we're just gonna dip it in both sides and then put it in the oil. We sell a lot of tameias, hundreds, sometimes maybe thousands a week. So it is a lot of work keeping them done. I eat about 3 a day because it's my favorite lunch. And I feel very good about it because I know I'm getting a lot of my vegetables in. If you look at the amount of fresh herbs that go into one of these, that's a lot of vitamins. Huh? Let's go and fry them. It's very important that the tameia does not touch the bottom of the pot. So you need to make sure there's enough oil in your pot so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. Let's take our nice tameias out of the oil. Our tameias are ready now, and I love to break one open and look inside. Look at all that fresh color. It's all the fresh herbs, the beautiful fresh herbs we put in. And one of the defining features, if people ask me what the difference between tameia and falafel is, there are two large main differences. One is the fact that we make this from fava beans instead of chickpeas. But the real big difference that people notice is the amount of fresh herbs we add in tameia. And if you smell what I'm smelling now, you'll want to stop and have lunch. All the freshness in the herbs create this chemistry. It's like a bouquet of savory herb smell. And it smells to me like an Egyptian tameia house. It's just it's a smell of childhood. Like I said, this is kind of the vanilla tameia. We like to embellish it a little bit. We have our own little secrets that we add in to just kind of bring up the taste a little bit more. This is still a beautiful tameia though. One of the things that I spend a lot of time doing for the business is developing recipes. I'm actually spend a great amount of trials, a number of trials, until we've perfected a recipe. So it becomes part of our business secrets. So it's important to make sure that we protect these secrets. We have obviously our ways, our preparation methods, our ingredients and so on. And in some cases, people don't know what the ingredients are. I'm the only one who knows what a particular ingredient is. And even in sometimes, there's a whole composition of ingredients that go into a particular dish, which actually to a large extent define the dish. But no one really knows their secret except me and my computer. There will be secret ingredients in our tameia, of course. Now I'm gonna make what I consider is probably one of the best sandwiches in the world. A fresh tameia sandwich. The contrast between warm, crispy, hot tameia, cold vegetables, and sauces inside warm bread is a unique experience. Okay, I'm gonna start now with some nice tomatoes, okay, onions, Okay. Nice pickles. There's a beautiful turnip pickles. You can use cucumber as well. And then we're gonna add some of our own little secret dressing for a Tameia sandwich. We have customers that want to buy this by itself. This is a secret, yeah. And then we're going to add some nicely seasoned tahina. Many recipes for tahina, they're all beautiful. And then comes the queen of the dish, the tameyas. And I like my sandwich well stuffed with pieces of tameia. That's really the mother of the whole dish. And finally, to top it all off, we're going to have some nice arugula here. With this sandwich, the contrast between crispy, warm, cold vegetables, sauces, seasonings is an incredible experience. There's so much complexity going on in here in terms of flavors and textures. It is actually a very popular sandwich for us. This dish was perfected over 1,000 years. By the way, my cousin who lives close to me, and I would often take a Tameia sandwich to him, so he had it and he seemed to be very happy. And that evening he sent me a message. It's the only message I think he ever sent me in Arabic. هل في دراسة من اللي بيقيسوا سعادة الشعوب حتى جاب سيرة تأثير الطعمية السخنة على نفسية البشر? Okay, I'll translate that. Did any of the studies that they've done to measure the happiness of people, did anybody ever mention the impact of a hot tameia on people's happiness? So obviously it made him very happy that day. It's really a beautiful sandwich. The dish I'm going to show you now is called Bisara. Bisara is a very interesting dish. It's probably more of a country dish in Egypt than it is a city dish, and it's really home cooking. I cannot truly tell you what the origin of each of the dish is, except that I know this is a pretty old dish. Part of what I feel is my mission in a restaurant is to keep it alive. So the dish is similar in composition to tameia. We have here some fava beans, coriander, fresh coriander. We also have mint. Because this is a family dish and because it's made in different parts of Egypt, you would have, everybody would have a different opinion about what should go into it. This is my own version. There is no one correct version. So I'm gonna start off with my beans, which I've washed. I'm just gonna boil them. We don't want to add too much water because we don't want it to become too thin. We're just gonna put it in and bring it to a boil. Then we'll let it simmer for a little bit. I'm gonna chop an onion, coarsely chopped, because I'm gonna puree everything at the end. A few cloves of garlic. Some salt, pepper, and a little bit of cumin. I'm gonna do the garlic, my second garlic in the pestle and mortar. There are many ways one can chop garlic. I personally, when I'm doing some Egyptian dishes, I really prefer to use an old-fashioned pestle and mortar. I find it actually affects the flavor of the dish at the end. A little bit of salt, just to avoid garlic cloves flying all over the place. Okay, crush them a little bit. Just get them broken into. A lot of Middle Eastern dishes are not very well documented, and historians sometimes struggle to find what the origin of the dish is. I like the idea that this dish goes all the way back to the time of the pharaohs. The name Bisara, meaning cooked beans. And the reason why I think this is quite possible is because city dishes in Egypt would be reflecting more of the cosmopolitan life in Egypt. A lot of people from different parts of the world moved into Egypt, moved out. There was a lot more dynamic. Around the time I was born, life in the countryside in Egypt would have probably been very close to life at the time of the pharaohs, even the irrigation techniques and so on. Because this is a country dish, I would say it probably has quite ancient roots, maybe at the time of the pharaohs. I want to keep it alive. I'm just getting my fresh herbs organized, the ones I'm going to use as a base for my Bisara. These are going to be coarsely chopped. Can't use too much mint. Mint will turn a dish bitter. So we just use a few sprigs, a few leaves. It's very simple. I just put them on medium-high heat. So now I'm gonna toast my coriander seeds. Okay. Almost a perfumey smell, huh? Once they become fragrant, then they're ready. Okay, gonna set them down. And in the meantime, so I'm gonna take an onion here, or more, and we're gonna thinly slice it. These onions are perfect if they're done slowly and with a lot of patience. Okay, so we've got some really nice olive oil here. And whatever is left over from caramelizing the onions, it's gastronomical gold. It has a beautiful flavor. You can almost eat it by bread itself. You want to turn this down. That's it. So that's done. So caramelization actually of the onions is generally into two parts. The first part is simply we're just taking the water out of the onion. So all that heat, we just keep stirring it, getting the water out without letting it burn or cook on one side more than the other. The second part is when the chemical reaction, the caramelization chemical reaction takes place. And in that part is when you actually need to be very careful and be very attentive because the onions can turn very quickly. Take them out when the time is right. Don't wait too long. This is just my spice mill, which I'm going to use to grind my coriander seeds that I toasted. So now I'm gonna finish off my Bisara base. Again, I'm gonna warm up the stove, some olive oil. So now we're gonna start out by putting some garlic in, yellows, and then we're gonna add some of that nice coriander. And to finish it up, that's it. So the next step now is I'm gonna puree my Bisara. Very important not to puree it when it's still hot. It's very dangerous to put a very hot liquid or a very hot substance in your blender, so you cannot do that. I'm always curious if a dish like this is very old, how would they have pureed it in the old days? And what kind of textures did they go for? Because obviously they did not have high-speed blenders and food processors. So, for example, when they were making meatballs, they had these very heavy brass pestle mortars, which they used to pound the meat to achieve the textures that they wanted. They also had these manual meat grinders that they used. Next is to put it in my serving dish. I love serving it in this clay dish. It's a real Egyptian dish. And basically what we're gonna do, almost like a pudding, we're gonna put it in the dish, okay? Flatten it out, okay? And set it, let it set. So now my Bisara is set. I can't wait to try it out, so. And first thing is we're just gonna throw some caramelized onions on top. Some of these caramelized onions we did. They were a labor of love, but they're definitely worth it. Now we're gonna serve the Bisara. Some wedges of lemon. I've chopped some chilies. I think it's a personal taste, but I think it will go beautifully with it. So I'm just gonna have a little bit. Some wedges of bread. Okay. A drop of olive oil. And my advice is to eat this slowly and enjoy it. It's an amazing appetizer. It's very popular. If you're gonna sit by yourself, curl up in front of the television, one of these summer evenings, and want a dish to enjoy, take your time with, this would be one. Lots of flavors, contrast, it's very fragrant, lots of fresh herbs. You've got the caramelized onions. There's so much underlying complexity within the dish. It's actually a really nice one. And when I go home, what makes a good or a bad day for me is really how happy people have felt, how happy were the customers, not how much money we made into our cash tray. I really want to see Egyptian food presented in a very good light. Egyptian food is good, it is labor intensive, it is difficult to make, but again, that part's of what makes it unique, and I don't want to lose that touch.